The marble floors gleamed under the morning sun, but what happened next would leave every employee in that bank questioning their values forever. Angela Mitchell, a poised black woman in her early 50s, stepped into Riverstone Financial's flagship branch, wearing a simple navy hoodie, dark slacks, and a neat ponytail under her baseball cap. To most eyes, she looked like any middle-class woman stopping by to handle her errands. But behind her calm gaze lay an unspoken mission. As she quietly observed the lobby, noting the staff's behavior toward each customer, she saw something that made her chest tighten with anger and sadness. White businessmen were greeted before they even reached the counter. An elderly Asian couple was directed to wait without a smile. A young Hispanic man in janitor clothes faced extra questions just to cash his paycheck. Angela waited 37 long minutes watching customer after customer served ahead of her, despite her arrival time. Finally, she rose and approached teller Lisa Barnes. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please," she said softly, sliding her ID and withdrawal slip across the counter. When Lisa saw the amount $115,000, her polite smile faded into suspicion. Angela saw her glance over at Mike Carter, the senior teller. Soon, Mike was looming behind Lisa, staring down at Angela with condescension in his narrowed eyes. In that moment, surrounded by quiet murmurs and judgmental stares, Angela felt humiliation burning beneath her skin. But what none of them knew was that this ordinary-looking woman was about to reveal her true power, and nothing in that bank would ever be the same again. Angela Mitchell stood motionless as the bank lobby buzzed with whispers that slid across the marble floors like cold drafts. Mike Carter, the senior teller, with slicked-back hair and a stiff navy vest, leaned forward over Lisa's station. His voice carried just loud enough for surrounding staff and waiting customers to hear. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone dripping with suspicion rather than service. Angela felt the burn of 100 eyes boring into her back as she straightened her shoulders and calmly replied, "No problem at all. I'm simply making a withdrawal from my account." Lisa shifted uncomfortably, looking down at Angela's withdrawal slip as if it were counterfeit. "It's a large amount, ma'am," she stammered, glancing nervously at Mike. "We just need to check a few things for security." Before Angela could respond, Mike turned to another teller. Richard Dean, a broad-shouldered man with a smirk permanently etched onto his lips, and motioned him over. Richard leaned in, eyes raking over Angela's modest clothes and plain purse with a sneer. "Probably some money laundering thing," he muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. "We just need to make sure these funds are actually yours," he added, his words coated in false politeness. Angela's heart pounded with a mixture of humiliation and controlled rage. Around her, the murmur of judgment grew louder. An elderly white woman clutched her purse tighter as she stared. A mother pulled her 2 children closer, whispering something under her breath while pointing in Angela's direction. Angela inhaled deeply, steadying her voice. "I've provided my identification and my bank card. I am a client here, and this withdrawal is within my account's daily limit." But before she could finish, a figure emerged from an oak-paneled office at the back of the lobby. Jessica Reynolds, the branch manager, strode forward in her charcoal gray suit and glossy black pumps, her every step echoing dominance and impatience. She didn't bother introducing herself. Instead, she snatched Angela's ID from Lisa's trembling fingers and looked her up and down, her lips curling in thinly veiled disdain. "Ma'am," she said coolly, $15,000 is a significant amount of cash. May I ask what it's for?" Angela stared at Jessica evenly, refusing to flinch at her tone. Around them, the staff exchanged looks, their expressions smug and entertained, as if watching a petty show. But none of them knew that the woman standing calmly before them wasn't here to cause trouble. She was here to reveal the rotten truth, hiding beneath their polished customer service smiles. And soon they would find out exactly who Angela Mitchell really was, and why their careers were about to come crashing down like a shattered mirror. The lobby fell into a suffocating silence as Jessica Reynolds held Angela's ID like it was something contaminated. Her manicured fingers pinched its corners delicately, while her eyes darted back and forth between Angela's face and the driver's license photo, with obvious skepticism. "This amount doesn't seem appropriate for someone like you," she said with a cold smile that never reached her eyes. "Riverstone Financial prides itself on discretion and dignity, but we have a class of customers we serve. We can't provide this service to you here." The words sliced through Angela like ice, but her expression didn't flicker. She could feel her pulse thudding in her neck as the entire lobby watched spellbound by Jessica's arrogance. Behind the counter, Lisa shifted uncomfortably, her fingers fidgeting with a stack of deposit slips that didn't need sorting. Richard Dean folded his arms and leaned against the counter, his smirk deepening, while Mike Carter stood close by, towering over Angela like a human barrier of contempt. Angela let her gaze sweep slowly across them, her dark brown eyes calm yet penetrating. She could hear a young mother behind her whisper to her children, "This is why you stay in school," while clutching her handbag tighter. The humiliation was deliberate and calculated, yet Angela refused to bow her head. Instead, she placed her bank card on the counter next to her ID and said, her voice as steady as stone, "I've been a client of this bank for many years. I am making a legitimate withdrawal from my account within my daily limit. I'd like to complete my transaction." Jessica's lips curled slightly in disgust. Perhaps, she said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that carried just loud enough for customers nearby to hear you'd feel more comfortable at the check-cashing place down the street. "They're more accustomed to handling your type of banking needs." A quiet gasp rippled through the lobby. Even Lisa blinked, her eyes widening at her manager's blatant contempt, but she said nothing. Angela could feel her chest tightening with the old familiar ache she'd felt countless times throughout her career, the ache of being judged and reduced to nothing more than a stereotype. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice echoing from decades past, "Stand tall, baby. They don't get to define you." Taking a deep, measured breath, Angela straightened her shoulders. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, powerful. "I'd like to speak with someone who can actually authorize this withdrawal," she said evenly, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. "Someone with real authority." Jessica's smile hardened into a grimace. "Ma'am, I am the highest authority here." She snapped her cheeks, flushing with anger at being challenged. "And if you don't leave now, I will be forced to call security." The quiet judgment in the lobby shifted into silent anticipation. The staff leaned in, sensing a confrontation. But what none of them realized was that this wasn't just another powerless black woman they were humiliating. This was Angela Mitchell, their CEO, and in mere minutes their lives would be turned upside down forever. Angela Mitchell stood perfectly still, the fluorescent lights gleaming off the marble floors around her, as if framing a courtroom for judgment. For a brief moment, she felt the quiet ache of every injustice she'd endured rising in her chest like a tide. But she pressed it down with calm precision. Without another word to Jessica Reynolds, she reached into her modest leather purse, its edges worn smooth from years of daily use, and pulled out her phone. The room's atmosphere tightened as she stepped back from the counter, her posture regale and unbroken. With a quiet authority, she dialed a number, her voice clear yet professional. "Yes, Diane. I need you at the downtown branch. Immediately." The name hit Jessica like a physical blow. Her eyes narrowed as she searched Angela's face for clues. Diane Porter, the Diane Porter. Head of operations for all of Riverstone Financial, Jessica's. Stomach twisted with unease, but arrogance rose up to smother it. She forced a chuckle. "You think name-dropping is going to change anything?" she sneered. "People like you always try to intimidate with empty threats." Behind her, Mike Carter crossed his arms tighter over his chest, adopting a stance of smug solidarity. Richard Dean spun a pen between his fingers, a smirk curling his lips. Lisa Barnes, however, couldn't hide her discomfort. Her shoulders hunched as she pretended to reorganize cash trays that were already neat, refusing to meet Angela's gaze. Angela ignored them all. She continued her call calmly, her words resonating through the silent lobby. "Yes, Diane. They've refused the transaction, that's correct. I'll wait." A flicker of panic crossed Jessica's face as realization began to dawn. But before she could gather her thoughts, the polished glass doors of the branch swung open with a force that sent a hush cascading through the lobby like falling dominoes. In stepped Diane Porter, her navy pantsuit immaculate, her sharp heels striking the floor with each purposeful step. The head of operations' eyes scanned the room like a hawk zeroing in on prey. "Stop this immediately," Diane commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a crack of thunder. The staff froze, their smug faces morphing into pale masks of confusion and fear. Jessica swallowed hard, smoothing her blazer as she stepped forward with a shaky smile. "Miss Porter, what an unexpected pleasure." Do you even know who this is?" Diane cut her off, gesturing toward Angela with a forceful flick of her hand. Jessica turned her gaze slowly back to Angela, confusion warring with dread in her eyes. Angela stood in quiet dignity, her phone now tucked neatly back into her purse. The air felt electric as Diane's words rang out across the lobby. "This is Angela Mitchell, the CEO of Riverstone Financial, your boss." Silence thundered through the branch. Richard's pen clattered to the floor. Mike's arms dropped to his sides. Lisa's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. And as Jessica staggered back, her face drained of color, the truth settled over them, like a final verdict from which there was no appeal. The room seemed to shrink around Jessica Reynolds, as Diane Porter's words reverberated through the silent lobby. Angela Mitchell, CEO. The title clanged in Jessica's ears like a bell tolling her career's doom. Her lips parted in shock, but no words came out. Behind her, Mike Carter's face drained of color, his bravado collapsing into wide-eyed terror. Richard Dean fumbled for his fallen pen with trembling hands, his smirk replaced by a slack-jawed stupor. Even Lisa Barnes, who had looked down in silent discomfort before now, stood rigid, tears welling in her eyes as realization washed over her. Diane Porter took a step closer, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble as she raised her tablet. With a flick of her manicured finger, she pulled up security footage that played out on the screen for all to see. Each humiliating second captured in crystal clarity. "We have watched everything," she said, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "We watched how you treated Mrs. Mitchell, and how you treated every other customer of color this morning." The footage split into frames, a white businessman in a suit being greeted with smiles, and led directly to a desk. An elderly Asian couple pointed curtly to the waiting area. A young Hispanic man forced to show multiple forms of ID for a simple transaction. Angela standing patiently in line as customer after customer was served before her. The weight of proof pressed down on the staff like an avalanche. "This isn't just about today," Diane continued her words, slicing through the suffocating silence. "This is about a pattern of systemic discrimination that has thrived under your management, Jessica. And today, you showed your true colors. Jessica's knees weakened, but she gripped the counter to keep from collapsing. Her mind scrambled for excuses, but her tongue felt thick and useless in her mouth. I didn't know," she croaked. Angela finally spoke, her voice calm yet unyielding. "You didn't need to know my title to treat me with dignity. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me like a human being." A quiet murmur spread through the customers gathered in the lobby, many of whom had been watching with silent empathy. An older black man in a postal uniform nodded slowly, as if affirming a truth he had lived for decades. A young mother clutched her son closer, her eyes brimming with tears as she mouthed, "Thank you." Diane Porter's gaze swept across the stunned employees. Effective immediately, she declared, her voice echoing off the marble walls, "Jessica Reynolds, Mike Carter, and Richard Dean are terminated. Your behavior today has violated not only Riverstone Financial's core policies, but basic human decency." As security was summoned to escort them out, Angela stood silent, regal and unbroken. This wasn't just a victory for herself. It was a reckoning for every customer who had been dismissed, belittled, or ignored because of the color of their skin. And as Jessica was led away, her eyes glassy with disbelief, Angela knew this was only the beginning of the transformation she had come to bring. The lobby remained hushed long after Jessica Reynolds, Mike Carter, and Richard Dean were escorted out, their footsteps echoing in the marble-floored silence like a funeral procession. Customers watched in stunned stillness, some clutching their deposit slips, others filming discreetly with trembling hands. Lisa Barnes stood behind her station shoulders, trembling, tears slipping down her cheeks as she stared at the floor. Angela Mitchell turned to her, her gaze softening with a flicker of understanding. "Lisa," Angela said, her voice gentle but resolute. "You showed discomfort today. You knew what was happening wasn't right, even if you didn't speak up." Lisa sniffled, her lip quivering as she whispered, I didn't know what to do." "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. I was scared." Angela nodded slowly, her eyes deep with the gravity of someone who had carried such fear for decades. "Learning to stand up against wrongdoing, when it comes from authority, is one of the hardest things to do," she said softly. "But it is also one of the most valuable skills you will ever gain." Diane Porter stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Lisa's shoulder. "You'll have the support you need," she said, her voice firm but kind. Then she turned to Angela, her gaze bright with fierce respect. "The board has been watching everything in real time," Diane said. "They've instructed me to inform you that they fully support your decisions today, and they are authorizing immediate implementation of your proposed equitable banking initiative." Angela exhaled slowly, feeling the tightness in her chest begin to loosen. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about transformation, ensuring no other customer of Riverstone Financial would ever feel the sting of humiliation for simply daring to access their own money. Around her, the staff stood rooted, silent witnesses to a moment that would reshape their lives and their branch forever. She let her gaze sweep the lobby, taking in the curious eyes of customers, the exhausted relief in Lisa's posture, and the quiet hope blooming in the older black man's tired smile. Then Angela spoke, her voice filling the wide hall with calm conviction. "Starting today, this branch, and every branch under our name, will no longer measure success only in profits. We will measure it by how equitably we serve every customer who walks through these doors." For the first time that morning, the tension lifted. It felt as if the entire room exhaled in unison, releasing years of silent burdens. Angela stood tall, her presence commanding, yet nurturing. This was not the end. This was the beginning of something far greater than herself, a movement of dignity, justice, and accountability that would ripple far beyond the polished floors of Riverstone Financial. Angela Mitchell stood at the center of the branch lobby, the hum of whispers fading into an attentive silence as every staff member and customer watched her. Diane Porter remained at her side, her presence exuding calm authority, while Lisa Barnes dabbed at her tears with the edge of her sleeve, her chest rising and falling in quiet relief. Angela's eyes swept across the faces before her, each etched with a different emotion: shame, hope, disbelief, and something deeper, a dawning recognition that today was the day everything changed. She lifted her chin and spoke, her voice echoing beneath the high ceilings. "Today is not just about firing 3 people," she said, her tone even and resolute. "It's about uprooting a culture that allowed them to act this way in the first place. From this moment forward, Riverstone Financial will be a place where every customer is served with dignity, where every employee is treated with respect, and where fairness is not an empty slogan, but the foundation of who we are." Her words carried through the lobby like the first warm breeze after a long winter. An elderly Hispanic woman seated by the teller windows nodded slowly, clutching her bank card to her chest, with tears brimming in her eyes. A young Asian father holding his toddler paused, absorbing every word, as though memorizing a lesson he longed to teach his child someday. Even the white businessman, who had earlier been greeted with quick smiles and easy service, watched her with a new, quiet reverence. Angela turned to Lisa, who stood trembling by her station. "Lisa," she said softly, "starting today, you will be promoted to interim branch manager." Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "But I'm just a teller," she whispered, her voice shaking. "No," Angela replied, her gaze unwavering. "You're someone who recognized when something was wrong, even if you didn't yet have the courage to speak up. That awareness is where real leadership begins. You will have support training and mentorship. But most importantly, you will bring a perspective this branch desperately needs, someone who knows how easily dignity can be taken away and how powerful it is to give it back." The lobby erupted into soft applause, the sound growing stronger as staff and customers clapped in quiet, respectful solidarity. Lisa's tears fell freely now, not from fear, but from a sense of responsibility and hope she had never dared to imagine. Angela's heart felt full as she glanced at Diane, who gave a small, proud nod. In that moment, Angela knew this was her true purpose, not just leading from a boardroom, but standing here on the polished floors, where everyday lives were changed, and ensuring that every person who entered these doors left feeling seen, valued, and respected. The battle was far from over, but today dignity had won its first decisive victory. 3 days later, the grand auditorium of Riverstone Financial's headquarters buzzed with the muffled hum of journalists, board members, and community leaders. Cameras flashed in rhythmic bursts as Angela Mitchell stepped onto the stage beneath the company's sleek chrome logo. She wore a simple cream suit with a gold pin at her lapel, her hair neatly styled back, her expression radiating poise and quiet determination. The room fell silent. As she approached the podium, every eye focused on her, the woman who had transformed a moment of humiliation into a movement of justice. Today, Angela began, her voice firm yet warm. Riverstone Financial launches its Equitable Banking Initiative, a $50 million commitment to anti-discrimination training, community outreach, and accountability systems that ensure no customer is ever treated as less than human again. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle into every heart in the room. Behind her, a massive screen displayed faces, a young Hispanic man smiling as he cashed his first business check, an elderly black woman holding her new mortgage approval letter with tears of relief, an Asian couple sitting at their small business loan, signing, hopeful for their future. These were not stock images. These were Riverstone's real clients, people whose dreams were built with dignity restored. Angela continued, her gaze sweeping the audience with quiet intensity. This initiative is not an act of charity. It is a correction of what should have been true all along. Respect, fairness, and dignity are not privileges. They are rights. The room filled with hushed murmurs of agreement. Reporters furiously typed her words into glowing tablets. Board members nodded solemnly, recognizing that under Angela's leadership, Riverstone's values were no longer abstract promises pinned to hallway walls. They were binding standards that shaped every decision. She smiled softly as she spoke her final words. When I stood in that branch lobby and was told I didn't belong, I realized something important. True leadership is not measured by your title or your office view. It is measured by how willing you are to stand up for those who have been overlooked, ignored, or silenced. The applause rose in waves, reverberating through the auditorium like a chorus of thunder. Angela stepped back from the podium, her heart full not of pride, but of a quiet certainty that she had fulfilled her promise to herself, to her community, and to the countless others who would never know her name, but would feel the ripples of her actions for years to come. Outside, as she walked down the steps of headquarters into the late spring sun, employees and customers lined the pathway, greeting her with respectful nods and grateful smiles. She inhaled the fresh air deeply, feeling its warmth on her face. For Angela Mitchell, this was not the end of her fight for dignity and justice. It was the beginning of a legacy that would outlast her own footprints on these polished marble floors. Months later, Angela Mitchell walked into a Riverstone branch, unannounced, dressed once again in her modest navy hoodie and slacks. This time, though, the atmosphere was different. Tellers greeted every customer with genuine warmth. An elderly black man approached the counter with confidence. A young Hispanic mother was guided patiently through a loan application, and an Asian retiree received respectful assistance opening his savings account. As Angela watched, her chest tightened, not with anger, but with quiet, profound relief. The seeds she had planted were growing into a culture of dignity. She knew this journey wasn't just about her title as CEO. It was about proving that true leadership isn't built on fear, arrogance, or power plays. It's built on respect, something no amount of money can buy. Dignity isn't a privilege reserved for a few, she thought, smiling as she exited into the morning light. It's a right we must protect for all. In life, you may not always be treated the way you deserve. But remember, your worth is never defined by another's prejudice. Stand tall, speak with integrity, and use your position, no matter how big or small, to make life better for others. If Angela's story moved, you drop a comment below sharing a time when you stood up for yourself or someone else. Like, subscribe, and share this video to remind everyone that dignity and respect should never be optional. Together we can build a world where every person feels valued, seen, and heard.